In the first part of our story, we met Ifeoma, a young girl who was adopted by a couple, Chike and Amara, from a bustling city in Africa. Ifeoma, hopeful for a new life filled with love, quickly realized that her new parents were not as kind as they seemed. Chike and Amara were harsh and cruel, treating her more like a servant than a daughter. Despite the challenges, Ifeoma tried to remain strong. One day, a wise and kind elderly woman named Mama Nkechi visited the house. She sensed something was wrong and promised to help Ifeoma. Mama Nkechi returned just in time to overhear Chike and Amara plotting to send Ifeoma away, and she decided to take the girl into her care, rescuing her from the life of misery she had endured. Mama Nkechi held Ifeoma's hand tightly as they walked down the quiet, tree-lined street away from Chike and Amara's house. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over everything. For the first time in a long while, Ifeoma felt a sense of peace wash over her. They reached Mama Nkechi's home, a cozy, modest house with a small garden in front. The house was nothing like Chike and Amara's grand, modern home. It was smaller, but it felt welcoming and full of warmth. As they entered, Ifeoma was greeted by the sweet smell of freshly cooked stew simmering on the stove. Mama Nkechi led her to the kitchen, where she served them both a bowl of the delicious meal. Ifeoma hadn't eaten properly in days, and as she took her first bite, she felt tears well up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Mama Nkechi noticed the tears and gently wiped them away with her thumb. "You're safe here, Ifeoma," she said softly. "No one will hurt you again." After dinner, Mama Nkechi showed Ifeoma to her new room. It was simple but cozy, with a soft bed, a small desk, and a window that overlooked the garden. Ifeoma couldn't believe this was her room. She ran her hand over the smooth quilt on the bed and looked around in awe. "I hope you like it," Mama Nkechi said, smiling warmly. "It's perfect," Ifeoma whispered, her heart full of gratitude. Over the next few days, Ifeoma slowly settled into her new life. Mama Nkechi was kind and patient, teaching her how to tend to the garden, cook traditional meals, and even tell stories around the fire at night. Ifeoma started to smile more, laugh more, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly happy. But just as Ifeoma began to believe that her troubles were behind her, a shadow from her past loomed over her newfound happiness. Chike and Amara hadn't forgotten about Ifeoma. They were furious that Mama Nkechi had taken her away, and they were determined to get her back, not out of love, but out of a twisted sense of control and pride. One afternoon, as Ifeoma was helping Mama Nkechi in the garden, she saw a familiar car pull up outside the gate. Her heart sank when she recognized it. It was Chike and Amara. Before she could react, the couple stormed into the garden, their faces twisted with anger. "What do you think you're doing, Ifeoma?" Amara snapped. "You belong to us." Mama Nkechi stepped forward, shielding Ifeoma with her body. "She belongs to no one," Mama Nkechi said firmly. "If you truly cared for her, you wouldn't have treated her the way you did. Now, leave before I call the authorities." Chike took a step forward, but Mama Nkechi's unwavering stance and the determination in her eyes made him pause. He knew better than to challenge her. With a frustrated grunt, he grabbed Amara's arm and pulled her toward the car. "This isn't over," he muttered before they drove away. Ifeoma watched the car disappear down the street, her heart still racing. Mama Nkechi placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, my dear," she said. "You're safe here. They won't harm you." But even as she spoke those words, Mama Nkechi knew that Chike and Amara were not the type to give up easily. She would have to be vigilant to protect Ifeoma from whatever they might try next. As the sun set that evening, Ifeoma sat by the window in her room, looking out at the garden below. She knew her journey wasn't over, and that she would need all the strength she had to face what was coming. But for the first time, she also knew she wasn't alone. Mama Nkechi was by her side, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days that followed were tense. Mama Nkechi was always watching, always alert. She knew that Chike and Amara were not people to be underestimated. Ifeoma, too, felt the tension, but she took comfort in Mama Nkechi's presence. The old woman had become the mother she had always wished for, and she knew that whatever happened, Mama Nkechi would protect her. One evening, as they were sitting in the living room after dinner, Mama Nkechi decided it was time to talk. She reached out and took Ifeoma's hand in hers. "My dear," she began softly, "I want you to know that you are strong. You have faced so much, and yet here you are, still standing. But I also want you to be prepared. Chike and Amara may try to take you back, and we must be ready for whatever they may do." Ifeoma nodded, her heart pounding. The thought of returning to that life filled her with dread, but she also knew that running away wasn't an option. "What can we do, Mama?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Mama Nkechi smiled gently. "We will stand firm. We will show them that love and kindness are stronger than any cruelty they can muster. And if they try to take you, we will fight together." The next morning, Ifeoma and Mama Nkechi set out to visit the local authorities. Mama Nkechi wanted to ensure that Ifeoma was legally under her care and that Chike and Amara could not easily take her back. The visit went well, and they were reassured that everything was in order. However, they knew that Chike and Amara might still try to use their influence to get what they wanted. Meanwhile, back at Chike and Amara's home, the couple was plotting their next move. They had never been ones to accept defeat easily. Chike, using his connections, began to gather information about Mama Nkechi. He wanted to find a way to discredit her, to make it seem like she was unfit to care for Ifeoma. Amara, on the other hand, started spreading rumors about Mama Nkechi around the neighborhood, hoping to turn people against her. Days turned into weeks, and while Ifeoma and Mama Nkechi enjoyed their time together, the looming threat of Chike and Amara was never far from their minds. Then, one day it happened. A loud knock echoed through Mama Nkechi's home. Ifeoma, who was helping Mama Nkechi in the kitchen, froze. Her heart raced as she exchanged a nervous glance with Mama Nkechi. They both knew who it could be. Mama Nkechi walked to the door and opened it. Standing there was Chike, flanked by two stern-looking men in suits. Amara was just behind him, her expression one of smug satisfaction. "We're here to take Ifeoma back," Chike announced coldly, holding up a piece of paper. "We have legal custody." Mama Nkechi glanced at the paper and immediately noticed something was off. It was a forged document, clearly made to look official but lacking the necessary seals and signatures. She wasn't fooled, and she wasn't about to let them take Ifeoma without a fight. "You will not take her," Mama Nkechi said firmly, stepping in front of Ifeoma, who had come to the door. "This document is a fake, and you know it. You have no right to her." Amara's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that," she hissed. She turned to the men in suits. "Take her." Before they could move, Mama Nkechi raised her hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she warned. "I've already contacted the authorities. They are on their way." Chike's face turned red with anger, but he knew when he was beaten. With a furious growl, he turned on his heel and stormed back to his car. dragging Amara along with him. The men in suits hesitated for a moment, then followed. The sound of the car speeding away was the only thing that broke the tense silence. As the car disappeared down the road, Mama Nkechi let out a long sigh of relief. She turned to Ifeoma, who was still trembling. "It's over for now," she said gently, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "But we must stay vigilant. They won't give up so easily." Ifeoma nodded, but deep down, she felt a new resolve growing. She wasn't the same scared girl she used to be. With Mama Nkechi by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges came next. Days passed, and although Chike and Amara had been driven away, the tension in the air remained thick. Mama Nkechi knew it was only a matter of time before they tried something new. She wasn't willing to wait for their next move. Instead, she decided to take action. Mama Nkechi began reaching out to her community. She knew the power of unity, and she called on her neighbors and friends to stand with her against the injustice Chike and Amara were trying to commit. The community had always respected Mama Nkechi, and when they learned of Ifeoma's plight, they were outraged. They rallied behind her, spreading the word about the couple's cruelty and gathering support. One afternoon, Mama Nkechi organized a meeting at her home. People from all over the neighborhood came, filling her small living room and spilling out into the yard. Ifeoma watched in amazement as person after person stood up to speak on her behalf, condemning Chike and Amara's actions and vowing to protect her. "We won't let them take you, Ifeoma," one of the neighbors declared, and the crowd cheered in agreement. Ifeoma felt tears of gratitude welling up in her eyes. For the first time, she truly felt like she belonged. Meanwhile, Chike and Amara were busy with their own plans. Angered by their failure, they decided to escalate their efforts. Chike used his connections to file a legal case against Mama Nkechi, accusing her of kidnapping Ifeoma and trying to turn the law in their favor. But what they didn't expect was the overwhelming support Mama Nkechi had garnered from the community. When the court date arrived, Mama Nkechi walked into the courthouse with her head held high, surrounded by the community members who had come to stand by her side. Ifeoma walked beside her, feeling both nervous and hopeful. She knew that this day could change everything. Inside the courtroom, Chike and Amara sat with smug expressions, confident that they would win. But as the proceedings began, it quickly became clear that things were not going to go as they had planned. Witness after witness from the community spoke up, testifying to the love and care Mama Nkechi had shown Ifeoma, and exposing the harsh and cruel treatment she had endured at the hands of Chike and Amara. The judge listened carefully, taking in every word. When it was time for Chike and Amara to present their case, their arguments seemed weak and hollow in comparison. The judge's expression grew stern as he looked at the forged documents Chike had presented. "This court does not tolerate deceit," the judge said firmly. Turning to Chike and Amara, "Your actions have shown that you are not fit to be the guardians of this child." Chike and Amara's faces paled as the judge's words sank in. The final ruling was clear. Ifeoma would remain under the guardianship of Mama Nkechi, where she would be safe and loved. As the gavel fell, signaling the end of the case, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Ifeoma's heart swelled with joy and relief. Mama Nkechi wrapped her arms around her, whispering, "It's over, my dear. You're safe now." Chike and Amara left the courtroom in disgrace, their heads hanging low. They had lost not only the case but also the respect of their community. From that day on, they were shunned by those around them, their cruelty and greed leaving them isolated and alone. Back at Mama Nkechi's home, a celebration was held in Ifeoma's honor. The community gathered once again, this time to rejoice in the victory of love and justice. Ifeoma was surrounded by people who cared for her, people who had stood up for what was right. As the sun set and the celebration continued, Ifeoma sat with Mama Nkechi in the garden. Looking up at the stars, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. "Thank you, Mama," she said softly, resting her head on Mama Nkechi's shoulder. Mama Nkechi smiled, her heart full of pride and love. "You're a brave girl, Ifeoma," she replied, "and you have a bright future ahead of you. Remember, no matter what, you are loved." Ifeoma nodded, feeling the warmth of those words deep in her soul. She knew that she was finally home,